The sun shimmered across Lake Avalon, reflecting off the calm blue water and the sleek glass windows of Omarian Leclair's mansion. It was supposed to be the first peaceful weekend since he'd moved in. But peace didn't last long. By noon, the gates of his $1,000,000 property swung open not by him, but by Karen, the HOA president, waving her clipboard like a royal decree. "Everyone inside, don't be shy. The view is perfect from the deck," she shouted. Dozens of strangers flooded in, balloons, coolers, loud music. Cars lined the street, within minutes his private lake. Front Retreat turned into a full-blown party. Omarian stepped out onto his patio, his jaw tightening. "What the hell is this?" Karen turned, smiling like it was her neighborhood. "Oh, relax, Omarian. The community needed a space for the graduation celebration, and your house was just sitting here." He clenched his fists. "You broke into my property," Karen scoffed. "You should be honored we chose your mansion. Don't be dramatic." Then the sound of shattering glass. A guest had dropped a champagne bottle in his living room. Another stumbled out of his private office holding a framed photo. Omarian's voice thundered across the deck. Everybody out now, but the music only grew louder. Laughter echoed. Someone jumped off his dock into the lake. That's when he pulled out his phone, not to call the cops, but to start recording, because what was about to happen would cost them more than they could ever imagine. The sun was still blazing high when Omarian returned to his lakeside mansion, expecting peace, but what greeted him was chaos. His dream, meticulously built over years of hard work, long nights, and sacrifices, had been transformed into a disaster zone. The pristine marble floors were smeared with muddy footprints. Torn streamers dangled from the balcony, fluttering in the breeze like tattered flags of disrespect. Beer cans floated in the pool, while remnants of snacks and overturned chairs littered the patio. Faint laughter echoed from the backyard where a dozen or more guests, drunk and careless, cannonballed into the lake, treating his private property like a public park. Omarian froze, disbelief etched into his face. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dime invested, all of it mocked by strangers who didn't even belong. He stormed toward the backyard, his footsteps ringing on the hard stone as the HOA president stepped forward. Dressed in pastel pink, sunglasses perched on her nose, champagne glass in hand, she smiled as though nothing had happened. "Oh, Omarian, you made it," she cooed, tilting her glass. "Isn't this place perfect for gatherings? Everyone's having fun." He clenched his jaw so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Perfect, perfect for what?" His voice was low, dangerously calm. "You destroyed my fence, smashed my dock, ruined my furniture, and invaded my home." "Oh, come on," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's community spirit. Everyone's celebrating, you know. Lighten up. Community spirit." The words rang in his ears like a cruel joke. This wasn't a celebration. This was trespass. This was theft of his peace, of his sanctuary. Omarian pulled out his phone, scanning the lawn, the balcony, the interior, capturing every detail: shattered vases, spilled drinks, strangers sprawled across his expensive furniture. Each snapshot a testament to audacity and disrespect. The music that had been blaring moments ago suddenly cut off as he raised his phone, recording a final sweep of the chaos. The crowd sensed the shift, their laughter faltering. "What are you doing?" the HOA president demanded, her smile faltering as the reality of his calm fury hit. "I'm collecting evidence," Omarian said, voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "Every word deliberate, measured, powerful. Every single one of you will be accountable for this." The guests murmured, some shifting nervously, realizing they weren't just at a wild party, they were witnesses to their own recklessness. Omarian turned back to the house, his eyes scanning the damage one last time. He walked with purpose toward the study, his suit brushing past the remnants of a ruined rug. Inside, he opened a drawer, grabbed his phone, and dialed his lawyer. "This is Omarian," he said, his tone calm but deadly serious. "We have a situation, and trust me, it's about to get expensive." Outside, the HOA president's laughter faltered. She glanced around at the crowd, searching for reassurance, but found only wide eyes and guilty whispers. For the first time, she realized she had chosen the wrong man to test. The backyard, once a scene of revelry and chaos, now felt like a courtroom waiting to happen. And Omarian, he was already preparing the case that would turn this shameless party into a legal reckoning. Because when someone invades your sanctuary, treats your life like a joke, and mocks your hard work isn't optional. It's inevitable. The sun was blazing over the city courthouse, its white marble steps gleaming like a warning. Cameras flashed, reporters gathered, and whispers filled the air. That's the man who sued his whole HOA. Omarian stepped out of his black SUV, calm in a tailored gray suit. He looked like the kind of man who had already won before even entering the building. Behind him, his lawyer walked with steady confidence, holding the thick case file that had shaken the entire neighborhood. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The HOA president sat at the defense table, makeup cracking under courtroom lights, eyes darting nervously between her attorney and the judge. Her once perfect composure was gone. She was no longer the queen of the lake, just another defendant facing the consequences of arrogance. The judge entered. Silence fell. All rise. Omarian stood tall. When he looked across the room, he saw them, the same people who had trespassed his home, the same neighbors who partied while he was away. Their laughter haunted his walls. Their footprints still marked his floors. The defense attorney began. This was a simple misunderstanding, Your Honor. A friendly neighborhood gathering, friendly. Omarian's lawyer interrupted sharply. My client's security footage shows over 100 uninvited guests breaking his fence, destroying his dock, and drinking in his living room. Is that your idea of friendly? The gallery murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. Then came the video, projected on the courtroom screen, laughter, bottles clinking, someone diving into his private lake. The HOA president visible, raising her glass. Her lawyer froze. She tried to speak. That's taken out of context. Omarian said, his voice cutting through the tension. The context is, you broke into my home. You violated my peace. You mocked my privacy. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Leclair, you're seeking damages of $100,000 per individual. Yes, Your Honor. Omarian replied firmly. Because they didn't just invade a house. They invaded dignity. The defense tried to recover, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness testified, some breaking down, admitting they were pressured by the HOA president to attend. One neighbor even whispered tearfully, she said it was okay. She said he wouldn't care. By the afternoon, the courtroom had turned into a battlefield of truth. Every lie collapsed, every excuse exposed. When closing arguments began, Omarian's lawyer spoke with quiet power. This isn't just about property. It's about principle. If a community's leaders can abuse their power without consequence, then no homeowner is ever safe again. The judge's gavel hit the desk. I've heard enough, he said sternly. This court finds the defendants liable. The room erupted, gasps, cries, silence. The HOA president lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. Omarian didn't smile. He just stood there, hands clasped, eyes calm as if peace, after all the chaos, had finally found him. Outside the courthouse, microphones rushed toward him. Mr. Leclair, how does it feel to win against your own HOA? He looked at the sea of flashing cameras and simply said, I didn't win against them. I won back my peace. And with that, he turned, walking down the courthouse steps as the sun hit the lake far in the distance, the same lake that once reflected his anger, now shining with quiet victory. The verdict echoed through the neighborhood like a thunderclap. By morning, the story had spread across every screen. HOA president found liable for illegal party, ordered to pay $100K per guest. The lakefront community that once adored her now avoided her. The same people who used to line up for her approval crossed the street when they saw her coming. Lawns that once glittered under her rules now stood in quiet rebellion, grass overgrown, signs tilted, the HOA banners taken down. Omarian stood at his mansion's dock, the same dock they had broken. The workers were rebuilding it plank by plank. Sunlight danced on the lake, and the scent of sawdust mixed with calm air. For the first time in months, there was no shouting, no trespassing, no uninvited laughter, just peace. But behind that peace was fire, because the HOA president wasn't done. Inside her once pristine house, she sat in front of a cracked mirror. Mascara streaked down her face. Bills and court notices cluttered her counter. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't dare open, texts from angry residents, demanding refunds for their share of the lawsuit. Her husband slammed the door. "You said it was a community event. Now we're broke because of your pride." She glared at him, voice trembling. "He embarrassed me in front of everyone. He humiliated me. I'll fix this. I swear I will." Outside, the neighborhood was changing. For the first time, homeowners gathered without her. On Omarian's front lawn, people came to apologize, couples, families, even teenagers who danced at the illegal party. One woman, eyes teary, said softly, "She told us you were away on vacation. We didn't know she lied." Omarian nodded. "I know. She used you all. But this isn't about revenge anymore, it's about rebuilding what she destroyed." They stood together, overlooking the quiet lake. It felt like a new beginning. But in the shadows, the HOA president was making her next move. She had found something, an old HOA clause, buried deep in the documents, one that gave her administrative rights to fine members for neighborhood disturbance. And she planned to use it against him. The next morning, Omarian received an envelope on his doorstep. Notice of community violation, unauthorized construction, and noise disturbance. He stared at it, stunned. She was still trying to fight back. His lawyer laughed bitterly when he saw the papers. "She's digging her own grave. Let her." But Omarian didn't laugh. He felt something darker stirring inside, that same anger from the day she invaded his home. Only this time it wasn't just about defending himself. It was about ending her reign for good. That night, as the sun set over the lake, Omarian stood on his deck, staring at her house across the water lights flickering inside, her silhouette pacing like a caged animal. The storm wasn't over, it had only changed shape. He whispered to himself, "You burned my peace once. Now I'll bury your power." The reflection of her house shimmered in the lake like a warning, and the wind carried the sound of doors slamming, phones ringing, and neighbors whispering. The HOA was cracking, and soon it would collapse. The sun blazed high over the lake, the calm water reflecting the mansion like a mirror. Omarian stood on the balcony, staring at the wreckage that had once been his peaceful escape, shattered glass on the deck, torn curtains fluttering in the breeze, and muddy footprints running across the marble floors. The laughter from that night still echoed faintly in his memory, like a scar that refused to fade. His phone buzzed another notification, a video clip. Karen's voice rang out in it. If he didn't want company, maybe he shouldn't live here. Followed by the cheers of her friends. His jaw clenched, enough was enough. He walked into his study, sunlight slicing through the blinds, landing on rows of neatly labeled folders, property documents, HOA regulations, and security footage. The same HOA rules Karen used to torment her neighbors were now in his hands. The front gate buzzer sounded. He looked at the screen. Karen, standing outside, sunglasses on, smile fake as ever. He opened the gate. She stepped in like she owned the place. "You really suing me, Omarian," she said, tone dripping with sarcasm, "over a little party." He took a step closer, calm but cold. "You broke into my home. You trashed my life. You think that's just a party?" Karen scoffed. "You think anyone will take you seriously? This neighborhood was fine before you moved in." That line hit like venom. The sunlight hit her face, revealing the arrogance, the entitlement, everything he dealt with in silence. But this time he didn't flinch. He leaned in, voice low. "You made one mistake, Karen. You picked the wrong man to humiliate." Behind him, his lawyer appeared with 2 officers, holding folders thick with evidence. Karen's smirk faltered for the first time. Omarian's tone sharpened. "Every message, every video, every guest that stepped into my house, it's all recorded. You didn't just trespass. You violated federal property laws." Karen's sunglasses slipped slightly as her confidence cracked. The officers exchanged glances. "Enjoy the sun while you can," Omarian said quietly, turning toward the house. "Next time you see it, it'll be through a courtroom window." The officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Karen froze. "You can't, actually," Omarian interrupted, calm but firm. "I can, and I did." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of distant sirens as the officers escorted her toward the gate. For the first time in months, Omarian felt peace, not revenge, but justice beginning to breathe. He turned back toward the lake, sunlight glinting off the water like victory itself. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong, and this was just the beginning. The courthouse loomed under a blinding mid-morning sun, tall white pillars, polished glass doors, and a crowd that buzzed like a hive outside. Reporters swarmed the entrance, microphones flashing, cameras rolling, their voices overlapping in a storm of curiosity. Is it true the HOA president threw an unauthorized party? Did she break into his house? Is Omarian Leclair really suing for $100,000 per guest? Inside, the air was thick anticipation, fear, power. Omarian walked through the hall in a tailored navy suit, calm as still water. Every step echoed off the marble floors, deliberate, steady. The world had mocked him once, now it waited to hear him speak. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her hair tied tightly, her fake confidence melting under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. Her lawyers whispered frantically, papers rustling. She tried to smile for the cameras, but her eyes betrayed her, darting, restless, trapped. Omarian's attorney leaned close. You sure you don't want to settle? He shook his head slowly. No, they need to see what happens when arrogance meets accountability. The judge entered, the room rose. Silence fell. Karen's lawyer stood first, his tone oily and defensive. Your Honor, my client admits there was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication regarding property access. There was no malicious intent. Omarian's lawyer rose smoothly. A misunderstanding, he repeated, turning to the jury. 100 strangers inside a man's private mansion, destroying property, drinking, dancing, stealing, and that's a misunderstanding. He clicked a remote. The courtroom lights dimmed. On the screen behind him, security footage flickered to life. Karen, on the deck, raising a champagne glass as music blasted. Dozens of people cheering behind her, then the image froze. Her voice rang out clearly through the speakers. He's not even home. Who's gonna stop us? Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Karen's lawyer buried his face in his hands. The judge's gaze hardened. Mrs. Wallace, is this your voice? Karen swallowed, her hands trembling. I don't recall. Omarian stood slowly. You don't recall breaking my doors. You don't recall the smell of gasoline on my deck. You don't recall the way you laughed while my dock caught fire. The entire room turned to him, his voice cracked, not with weakness but with truth. I bought that home after my wife died. It was supposed to be peace, a place to start over, and you turned it into a circus. You made me the spectacle. Karen's facade shattered. I didn't mean to. He cut her off. You meant every word, every insult, every command. You thought my peace was yours to take. The courtroom fell silent, so silent even the clicking pens stopped. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Leclair, your evidence is overwhelming, and your testimony. He paused, glancing toward Karen, shows a cruelty beyond negligence. Karen's eyes filled with panic. Wait, Your Honor, please, I can explain. But the gavel struck once. Sharp, final. This court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Omarian Leclair. The defendant will pay $100,000 per trespasser, and the HOA board will be placed under federal review effective immediately. The courtroom erupted, reporters surged forward, flashes blinded the air. Karen sank into her chair, her face pale as chalk. Her world had just collapsed in broad daylight. Omarian didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He simply turned to his lawyer and whispered, "We're done here." As he walked out, the crowd parted like the tide before something powerful. Outside, the day gleamed bright, clouds drifting lazily across the blue sky. He stepped into the sunlight, the wind brushing against his suit. For the first time in years, he felt weightless. Behind him, Karen was escorted through the side doors, her wrists trembling, reporters shouting her name, a name that now carried shame, not status. Omarian paused at the courthouse steps, looking over the city stretched before him. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about meaning. He whispered to himself, justice isn't revenge, it's remembrance. And as he walked down those steps, the sound of applause filled the air, not from celebration, but from recognition. Because in that courtroom, one man's dignity had finally been restored. The courthouse doors burst open, and sunlight poured in like fire. Reporters surged forward, shoving microphones and cameras into Omarian's path. The crowd's roar was deafening, in questions flying like bullets. Mr. Leclair, how does it feel to win the biggest HOA lawsuit in the state? Do you think Karen Wallace deserves jail time? Is it true you're donating part of your settlement? Omarian raised a hand, not to silence them, but to ground himself. The flash of cameras painted him in bursts of gold and white light, each one capturing a man who had walked through humiliation and come out untouchable. He spoke calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. This wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. If someone thinks power gives them the right to humiliate others, they just learned otherwise. The crowd cheered. The microphones swayed forward like a field of metal flowers, but behind them, pushing through the line of officers, came a figure no one expected to see. Karen. Her face was pale, her hair messy from the wind, her eyes wild with disbelief. Her lawyer tried to hold her back, but she shoved past him. You ruined me, she screamed, voice cracking. You think this is justice? You destroyed my life. Omarian turned, still calm. You destroyed your own life when you decided mine didn't matter. You planned this, she yelled. You set me up, that footage was fake. The officers stepped forward, forming a wall between them, but the cameras were already rolling, zooming in on her trembling face, on his steady eyes. One reporter whispered, this is going live. Karen pointed a shaking finger at him. You can't take everything from me. He took a slow breath, his tone quiet, but unshakable. You took everything from yourself when you stepped onto my property. The officers moved in. Ma'am, you need to step back. But Karen wasn't listening. Tears streaked her face as her voice broke completely. I was the president. I was supposed to be respected. Omarian looked at her, not with anger, but with a strange, heavy sadness. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. The crowd hushed. Reporters froze. Even the flashing lights seemed to slow. Then, Karen's knees gave out. She dropped to the pavement, sobbing into her hands as the officers gently pulled her to her feet. The same crowd that once clapped for her HOA speeches now turned away in silence. Omarian stood still for a moment, watching the scene unfold. His lawyer touched his shoulder. We should go. He nodded, walking toward the sleek black SUV waiting at the curb. As he reached for the door, a voice from the crowd shouted, You showed the world what justice looks like. He paused, then turned slightly, sunlight washing over his face. No, he said softly, I just reminded them what dignity looks like. The door closed behind him, the engine started. The SUV pulled away slowly from the courthouse, leaving behind the chaos, the flashing cameras, and the broken pieces of Karen's pride. The camera panned upward, sunlight gleaming off the courthouse dome, the crowd shrinking below. Justice didn't always roar, sometimes. It walked away in silence. By the next morning, the world was awake and watching. Every major news channel looped the same footage again and again. Karen Wallace, the once feared HOA president, collapsing in tears on the courthouse steps. Her voice, cracking with rage and regret, echoed across headlines. You ruined me. Social media burned. Clips of her shouting flooded timelines. Memes, news debates, podcasts, everyone was talking about it. Justice for Omarian trended worldwide. But while the world was celebrating, Omarian sat in his lakefront living room, sunlight spilling across polished floors, the same ones that had once been trampled by strangers. He wasn't smiling, not out of pity and not out of pride. He just sat there silent, staring at the reflection of the water dancing on his glass windows. His phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Mr. Leclair, a deep voice said, This is Chief Daniels from the State Attorney's Office. Omarian straightened. Yes, sir. We just wanted you to know Karen Wallace was taken into custody this morning. Multiple counts of trespassing, destruction of property, insurance fraud, and falsifying community documents. He exhaled quietly. Insurance fraud? Yes. She tried to file claims against your property after the fire pretending it was hers. Omarian's jaw tightened. Of course she did. We're moving for a full prosecution, but there's something else. Silence hummed through the line. She wasn't acting alone. Omarian frowned. What do you mean? We've found correspondence between her and several HOA board members, people who voted to authorize her inspection of your property. They were all in on it. He stood slowly, walking toward the large window overlooking the lake. Sunlight shimmered over the calm surface, but beneath it he saw the reflection of something darker. So it was never just her. He said quietly. No, sir, the chief replied, and that means this case isn't over. Omarian's gaze hardened. Then neither am I. He hung up and stood there, the world outside alive and bright, but inside his focus sharpened. Later that day, a live broadcast filled every TV in the country. Karen Wallace stood in orange prison attire, wrists cuffed, head down as the judge read the charges. The court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. Gasps filled the courtroom. Cameras zoomed in on her face, once proud, now pale and hollow. Omarian watched from home, the sound low, his reflection mirrored beside hers on the TV screen. Two sides of justice, one destroyed by greed, the other rebuilt by truth. A knock echoed at his door. He turned. His lawyer stood there, holding a thick folder. You might want to see this, she said, stepping inside. She opened the file, documents, emails, HOA approvals, all proving what the chief had said. Karen hadn't acted alone. Omarian flipped through each page, his anger quiet but deep. They thought power would protect them, he muttered. They forgot power comes with accountability. The lawyer nodded. What do you want to do next? He looked up, eyes like steel. We go after every single one of them. The lawyer hesitated. You're sure you've already won? He interrupted softly. Winning isn't the goal. Changing the system is. That evening, the sun dipped low over the lake, turning the sky gold and crimson. Omarian stood on the dock, rebuilt, stronger than before. The wind carried faint sounds from the distant town, people talking, laughing, living. And in that moment he realized it was never about revenge. It was about restoring what dignity meant. He turned away, heading back inside as his phone buzzed again, another unknown number. He answered. Mr. Leclair, a woman's voice said, warm, steady, this is from the National Homeowners Federation. We've been following your case, and we'd like to offer you a seat on the National Oversight Council. He froze, taken aback. You want me to? Help us rewrite HOA accountability laws. You'd lead the reform board. Omarian glanced out at the glowing lake, the reflection of sunlight fading across the ripples. I'll do it, he said quietly. But this time, we build something fair. That's exactly why we called, she replied. The call ended, silence returned, but for the first time in years, that silence wasn't lonely. It was powerful. 2 months had passed since the chaos at his mansion, but the ripples of Omarian Leclair's fight were still spreading like wildfire. Headlines had grown into a movement, the HOA reckoning. Neighborhoods once silenced by fear now held public meetings. Boards that had ruled unchecked were being questioned, investigated, and exposed. Ordinary citizens were finally realizing they could stand against abuse of power. And at the center of this storm, the man they had once tried to intimidate, Omarian. He entered the Capitol hearing room in a crisp charcoal suit. Cameras flashed like miniature suns, reporters shouted his name, protesters outside chanted for reform. He did not wave, he did not smile. He simply walked, measured and unyielding, every step resonating authority and purpose. Inside, members of the National Homeowners Oversight Council waited, the same system that had once turned a blind eye to corruption and intimidation. Their faces betrayed unease, as if seeing their own negligence reflected in the man before them. Mr. Leclair, the chairman began, voice tense, your testimony has already sparked national attention. We thank you for appearing. Omarian inclined his head, his eyes scanning the room with calm determination. I didn't come for attention, he said, voice low but carrying. I came because this started in my driveway, and it spread into communities across the nation. That should not happen to anyone else. Every microphone tilted closer, every camera focused, the room was still. What began as a neighborhood rule. Omarian continued, became a weapon, a community board became a cartel, and those entrusted to protect homeowners forgot one crucial thing. Power without humanity destroys everything it touches. He paused, letting the words sink in. Every eye was on him, every silence stretched heavy with truth. I stood in my backyard as strangers trashed my home. I watched neighbors film instead of intervene. I saw officials smile at my pain, and I realized this system isn't broken. It was built this way. Murmurs rippled across the room, journalists leaning forward, pens poised, recorders on. I don't seek revenge, Omarian added, his voice steady, unwavering. I seek reform. I want a law that holds every HOA accountable. I want homeowners to understand one simple truth. Your home is not a privilege, it is your right, and no one should ever treat it otherwise. Applause erupted, some standing, some teary-eyed. For a moment, Omarian just stood there, letting the weight of vindication wash over him. This wasn't victory. This was justice not personal, but universal. That evening, he walked alone through the quiet city streets. Rain had freshly fallen, leaving the pavement gleaming under streetlights, the air sharp and clean. He passed a small cafe where laughter spilled into the street, the clink of mugs ringing out, life unthreatened by fear. He allowed himself a faint smile, then his phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You may have one, but the system doesn't change that easily. No signature, no name, just a warning. Omarian stared at it for a long moment before deleting it. Then I'll change it again. He whispered, voice firm, one truth at a time. 3 weeks later, in a dimly lit boardroom far from public scrutiny, 5 people gathered around a massive mahogany table. 4 men, 1 woman, heads of regional homeowner associations, untouched by the scandal, yet intertwined in deeper, shadowy networks. He's becoming a symbol. One man said, voice low, almost fearful. If this momentum continues, we risk losing everything we've built. We can't touch him the way we did the others. Another replied, he's protected by public attention now. Social pressure shields him. The woman leaned forward, cold and calculating. Then we outmaneuver him. Let him try to reform the system. We'll make it so tangled he'll drown before he reaches the core. All nodded, silent agreement hanging in the air. A large wall behind them displayed property maps, legal loopholes, corporate connections, a sprawling network spanning multiple states. One name was circled in red, Omarian Leclair. Back in his office, Omarian sat at his mahogany desk, the city skyline glowing in the distance. Letters from hundreds of homeowners lay in neat piles, messages of gratitude, pleas for guidance, accounts of similar abuses. Each one reminded him this wasn't just about his home, his driveway, or even his story. It was about the system. It was about everyone. He opened a fresh notebook, writing across the top in bold, deliberate strokes, rebuilding trust. Beneath it, the first line, they can't control what they can't corrupt. He closed the book, leaned back, and exhaled. His eyes rested on the horizon, ready for whatever battle came next. The movement had started, and Omarian was prepared to lead it one truth at a time. The city had moved on. The news cycle was changing. But in the quiet, echoing halls of power, new plans were being written. While Omarian Leclair stood in front of crowds, becoming the face of hope, there were others older, colder, hidden in plain sight who watched from the shadows. 3 weeks after the hearing, in a towering glass building overlooking the lake, 5 figures gathered in a boardroom with no windows open, blinds drawn tight. Sunlight barely filtered through, slicing across the polished table like lines of fire. At the head of the table sat Eleanor Marks, a name few outsider circles had heard, but those who had whispered it with fear. She wasn't a president of one HOA. She controlled 20, 7 through shell boards, proxy names, and buried paperwork. She was the architect of the system itself. She tapped a manicured finger against her tablet. A photo of Omarian Leclair appeared on the wall screen, standing tall at the Capitol hearing, his words frozen mid-sentence. He's dangerous, she said quietly, not because of what he's done, but because of what he makes others believe they can do. The man beside her, a thick-set figure with silver hair and a crooked smile, leaned forward. Public sympathy fades, Elinor. He's just another headline. People forget. Elinor didn't blink. Not this one. Another voice, deeper, smooth, calculated, cut in. He's getting funding now. Crowdsourcing, legal backing. He's forming a foundation. The room murmured. If he organizes homeowners on a national level, the silver-haired man said, we lose control. The local boards collapse, the revenue streams, the land deals. Gone. Elinor stood. The sound of her heels echoed sharply. Then we stop him, permanently, not by threat, not by violence, by corruption. She turned the screen off. We'll make him the face of the very thing he's trying to destroy. The others looked up, puzzled. We'll plant funds, fake donations, associate him with fraud, misuse, bribery. A single scandal, one good enough, and the public will do the rest. She smiled faintly, cold as glass. People love heroes, but they love watching them fall even more. The man across the table nodded slowly. We'll need someone on the inside. Elinor's gaze shifted to the youngest person in the room, a sharp-eyed woman with neat braids, barely 30, quiet but always listening. I already have someone, Elinor said. She starts tomorrow, right in his foundation office. The woman glanced up, meeting her eyes the faintest flicker of hesitation in her expression. Don't fail. Elinor warned softly. He doesn't deserve your pity. He's standing in the way of progress. Outside, the sunlight reflected off the lake, turning gold beautiful, bright, and cold. Meanwhile, Omarian sat in his home office overlooking the same lake. Papers spread across the desk, his phone buzzing nonstop. He was drowning in messages, journalists, community leaders, victims of HOA abuse from all over the country. A letter caught his attention, handwritten, not printed. He opened it slowly. Mr. Leclair, I don't know you, but my parents lost everything to a corrupt HOA like yours. Please don't stop. You're the only one who's fighting for people like us. He placed the letter aside, eyes softening. His assistant, Maya, walked in with a tablet. Sir, donations have passed 2 million. You're trending everywhere. #Justice for homeowners hit national news. He nodded quietly. It's not about money. It's about proof. We're going to rebuild the system from the ground up. Maya smiled. You've got volunteers lining up to work for free, even ex-HOA members. Good. Omarian said, we'll need every one of them. Then Maya hesitated. Sir, one of the new hires, she came from a national HOA council. Impressive background. Says she wants to help reform from within. Omarian looked intrigued. Name, Lena Marks. He didn't realize the danger in that name. Not yet. That night, while the city slept, Elinor Marks stared out her penthouse window, overlooking the glittering skyline. Her phone buzzed once. A single message appeared from an encrypted number. She's in. She smiled to herself, the reflection of the city glowing in her eyes. Let's see how long the hero lasts. The screen faded to black. Morning light shimmered across the glass walls of the Leclair Foundation. The lake outside glittered like melted silver, peaceful, a sharp contrast to what was about to unfold inside. Omarian stood at the podium of his new press room, facing a sea of reporters, cameras, and bright lights. Behind him hung a massive banner reclaiming home, justice for every owner. His voice carried confidence, but behind that calm tone lived exhaustion. This isn't about revenge, he said. It's about rebuilding what's fair, what's right. This country needs accountability, not fear, and that starts now. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. The world saw a man rising from ashes, powerful, unbreakable. But somewhere in the crowd, one camera wasn't recording the speech. It was scanning his face, analyzing his every expression. Behind that lens was Lena Marks. She smiled for the cameras, clipboard in hand, pretending to take notes, but in her purse, a hidden recorder blinked red. Her instructions were simple. Find evidence, plant discrepancies, feed the system false leads that would frame Omarian's foundation for embezzlement. It should have been easy, it always was, But this time, something was different. Every time she spoke to Omarian, she saw something disarming in his eyes, not arrogance, not ambition, just belief, pure belief that change was possible. He treated every volunteer like a partner, every janitor like family. When an old woman walked in one afternoon, crying over losing her home, Omarian knelt beside her not as a leader, but as a son. "We'll fix this, ma'am," he said softly. "You'll get your home back, I promise." Lena froze, watching that because no one fakes that kind of sincerity. Days turned into weeks. Her reports grew emptier, her handlers grew impatient. One night, while Omarian worked late, Lena approached his office door, recorder in hand. But what she heard stopped her cold. He was on a video call with his legal team. "If this fails, they'll destroy me," he said quietly, "but if I don't try, they'll destroy everyone else." There was no ego in his voice, only resolve. She stood there for a moment, frozen, before turning off her recorder. Her hands shook. For the first time in years, she questioned the mission, questioned herself. 3 days later, chaos hit. Headlines blared. Leclair Foundation under federal investigation for fraud. Funds missing. Whistleblower steps forward. Omarian was stunned. He read the news like it was a bad dream. His accounts frozen. His offices raided. Maya stormed in, waving papers. "Sir, someone accessed the internal fund servers, rerouted donations. They used your credentials." His jaw clenched. "Who?" Before she could answer, 2 federal agents entered the office. "Mr. Leclair, we have a warrant for your arrest." The room went silent. Cameras outside swarmed the building. He looked at Lena standing at the edge of the room, pale, trembling. Their eyes met, and in that moment he understood. "It was you," he whispered. Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't mean to. I didn't think they'd. Who sent you?" She couldn't answer. Hours later, the boardrooms of power celebrated quietly. Eleanor Marks poured herself a glass of wine. On her tablet, Omarian's mugshot flashed beneath the headline, "HOA activist charged in multi-million-dollar scam." She smiled coldly. The hero falls, predictable. But her celebration didn't last long. Because that same night, something unexpected happened. A leak. Dozens of confidential HOA files were released online, exposing the very corruption Eleanor had spent years hiding. Fake boards, illegal fees, hidden shell companies, all tied to her and the source, Lena Marks. She had walked straight into the FBA office, trembling, carrying a flash drive. "I was part of it," she confessed, "but he's not the criminal, they are." Her testimony triggered a storm. 2 weeks later, courtroom. The marble floors gleamed under bright daylight. Omarian sat in silence beside his lawyer, hands folded, face calm but weary. The gallery was packed, journalists, victims, and homeowners watching every second. Eleanor Marks entered, escorted by marshals, still defiant, but her eyes flickered when she saw Lena seated with the prosecution. The judge entered, gavel struck, silence fell, the prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the defense has been accused of fraud, but new evidence proves that the fraud originated within the HOA syndicate itself, orchestrated by MS Eleanor Marks. The so-called whistleblower was, in fact, the key witness who turned on her employers." Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. "This is a setup. You think one little foundation can destroy decades of—" The judge cut her off sharply. "Enough. The documents speak for themselves. MS Marks, you are hereby charged with racketeering, fraud, and obstruction of justice." The courtroom buzzed. Cameras flashed. Omarian turned to Lena, their eyes meeting again, this time not with betrayal, but gratitude. He leaned closer and whispered, "You didn't destroy me. You freed me." Lena lowered her head, tears streaming silently. Eleanor screamed as guards took her away, shouting about power, control, legacy. But her words meant nothing now. The system she built had just burned itself down. Outside the courthouse, sunlight flooded the steps. Reporters surrounded Omarian. "Mr. Leclair, what happens next?" He looked out over the crowd, the people cheering, holding signs. "Justice for homeowners. We believe." "What happens next?" He repeated softly. "We rebuild, brick by brick, fair and clean. This time the homes will belong to the people, not the powerful." Applause thundered, cameras rolled, the lake shimmered in the distance like a promise finally kept. He took a deep breath, smiling faintly. They tried to burn my peace, he said, but you can't burn justice. It always rises from the ashes. He turned, walking down the courthouse steps as the wind caught his suit, confident, unbroken, unstoppable. And somewhere far away on a prison TV screen, Eleanor watched in silence, the smile gone from her face. Justice wasn't loud anymore. It was radiant, and this time it had a name, Omarian Leclair, fade to white.